I'm Belle Reid, and welcome back to another video. So, if you've been watching this channel for a little while, chances are you know that I love making music with feedback and chaotic sounds. And if you're new to this channel and you didn't know that, then welcome, and now you know. So one of my favorite ways of working with feedback is through no input mixing, in which you patch a mixer's outputs back into its own inputs in order to create all kinds of really interesting, sputtery, noisy, and super chaotic sounds. Aside from all of the awesome sounds that you get with feedback patching, one of the reasons why I love working in this way so much is because it really alters the way that I listen to and interact with my instruments. When you patch a mixer's output back into its own input, for example, you're creating a really unstable loop that's going to respond to your input in super unpredictable ways. So, for example, you could push a single button or turn up a volume control or a frequency knob, and it might simultaneously change the frequency of the sound and launch it into some strange new pattern or sputtery texture. So I really love this because it makes my instrument feel more like a duo partner, and it really encourages me to listen super deeply to every single moment and to approach each of my physical gestures with a lot of intention. You can combine no input mixing with other gear, such as effects pedals, to expand into even more rich and chaotic sound worlds. I actually made a video about that exact topic recently, so I'll leave a link in the description below in case you want to check it out. But you don't need a mixer in order to explore this technique. You can do it with effects pedals on their own. So today I wanted to talk about how to approach this no input style feedback patching using the Fairfield Circuitry Hors pedal. By the way, there are some affiliate links in the description of this video in case you want to check out hors d'oeuvre or any of the other gear that I use in this video. Using those links helps out my channel at no extra cost to you and makes it possible for me to continue making more videos like this one. So thank you. Okay, with all that said, let's get started. So before diving straight into feedback madness, let's start off with a quick overview of the Fairfield Circuitry Hors pedal. So hors d'oeuvre is a signal routing utility for pedal boards. At its simplest, this pedal can be used as a simple effect loop. It has an input, an output, and an effect send and return. It has continuous controls for both wet and dry signal levels. So the output can be any combination of your direct input signal and the signal from the effect loop. This is really handy because some effects like distortions, fuzzes, and others don't always have wet-dry mix controls. So this gives you a little bit more control over the effect blend. You'll also see you have a polarity switch for the wet signal, which can be helpful in some cases to correct phase cancellation between the input and the output. Okay, so that's all pretty cool, but the thing that really interests me about this pedal is the giant feedback knob right here, labeled Feed. Now, this knob introduces feedback into the effect loop itself, connecting the loop's output back into its own input. This is a similar concept to no input mixing, where introducing feedback can cause the circuit to start to self-oscillate. And in fact, by patching the effect loop's output on this pedal back into its input and turning up the feedback here, you can cause this pedal to start to self-oscillate all on its own. So let's take a quick listen to that. Just a quick note here, whenever you're starting to use the feedback control, I recommend having the wet knob turned all the way down to start. Simply because feedback sounds can get really unruly very quickly. Awesome, so we're hearing a tone from this pedal. And then you could run the output of this into any other effects pedal that you wanted for additional processing. So for this example, I'm sending the Fairfield Circuitry Hors d'oeuvre, that same self-oscillating tone we heard before, into the Randy's Revenge ring mod. Then that is being sent into the Fairfield Circuitry shallow water pedal. And finally, the output of that is going into this Boss PS3 pitch shifter delay. So I have all of these bypassed at the moment. I'm just going to introduce them one at a time so we can hear the different effect that they're having on this tone. Awesome. So that's pretty cool already. But of course, things can get even more interesting when we start to insert other effects pedals into the effect loop itself. So let's take a look at some examples of that. Before we go any further with demos, I just wanted to quickly mention that typically I always try to keep the modules and the cables on screen as organized and neat looking as possible. But when you are doing feedback patching with effects pedals like we are, things just get a little bit crazy and a little bit messy. So we're going to be embracing the chaos in all forms today as we move forward. So for this demo, I'm patching the output from the hors d'oeuvres send output into the Fairfield Circuitry Accountant. This is a little compressor module. And then I'm patching out from there into Randy's Revenge, the ring mod. Then I'm taking the output from Randy's Revenge and patching back into the return input on Fairfield Circuitry hors d'oeuvre. And finally, we are monitoring the output of hors d'oeuvre. So I have found that adding a compressor into the feedback loop can really help keep the levels a little bit more predictable, which gives me a bit more control over the saturation and clipping in the feedback loop. So I'm going to keep this compressor pedal here as part of the signal chain for all of these different demos. I don't know that I will necessarily use it for all of the demos, so just keep your eyes here on the bypass LED to see when it is or isn't in use. So there's also a polarity switch here inside of the feedback loop. And in some cases, switching this will affect the tone of the outcome pretty significantly. Awesome. So we're already getting to some pretty interesting results here, even just with a couple of pedals inserted into this feedback loop. And I'm sure you're able to see already how patching in this way really alters the behavior and the way that we can interact with these pedals. In my opinion, and one of the reasons why I love this way of working so much, is these pedals, when you're working with feedback loops, they become less about just processing the sound and they kind of become instruments all of their own. And all of these different knobs and switches that we have access to become very performable parameters that we can interact with. I personally find it really, really cool how switching the polarity, for example, or turning the compressor on or off, or jumping from low to high frequency mode can have so many different kinds of impacts on the sound. It can completely change the texture, it can cause entirely new patterns to emerge, and so on. We're going to see a lot more examples of this in action as we explore different combinations of pedals inside of the feedback loop. So let's take a look at some of those now. Awesome. So this example here combines some of the ideas that we were looking at previously. First, I have the Red Panda tensor pedal inserted into the feedback loop, along with the accountant from Fairfield Circuitry. That's our little compressor. And then in addition to the pedals inside of the feedback loop here, I also have this Boss PS3 pitch shifter delay pedal on the end of the signal chain. So all of this is being sent out from hors d'oeuvre and into the PS3, which is what we are monitoring. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like. So far, we've been doing everything with just effects pedals alone, using feedback as our only sound source. But hors d'oeuvre has an external input too, so we can actually send external instruments into our patches as well. So in this patch, I am running the semi-modular synth Mavis into hors d'oeuvre. We can hear that dry here. And I am using the Boss PS3 pitch shifter delay in the hors d'oeuvre feedback loop, as we've seen before. Here's just that feedback loop sound. And here's all of that combined together. Of course, the other really cool thing that you can do when you're using modular or semi-modular synths as external inputs is you can send control voltage from the synths to modulate different parameters on your pedals. So this is the exact same patch we were just looking at, but I've added in some control voltage from Mavis. I'm sending the keyboard CV out to modulate the rate of the LFO on the Moog ring mod. And I'm sending the output from the sample and hold on Mavis to modulate the frequency of the ring modulator. And of course, we can mix and match whether we are using external sound sources and control voltage at the same time, or as we are doing in this patch example, we are just using control voltage from the zero control, sending that over into the Moog ring modulator. And our only sound source otherwise is being created here with this feedback loop. All right, so here's a final patch that combines a bunch of these ideas together. We've got Randy's Revenge ring mod in the feedback loop here with hors d'oeuvre. I'm using the zero control touch plates to send control voltage to modulate Randy's Revenge. And then at the end of the signal chain, I'm running everything into the Fairfield Circuitry shallow water pedal and then into the GFI system Skylar reverb for a nice long shimmery reverb. So I don't know about you, but every time I discover a new way of working with feedback and chaos in my music, I get really, really excited. I always find that patching in this way just opens up a whole world of new and unexpected and really dynamic sounds. And it's something that I find super inspiring. As much as I love no input mixing, and it will always be a part of what I do, I have to say that it's really fun to be able to explore this technique without needing a mixer. And as someone who travels a lot for shows, I can see this being really helpful to just be able to throw a couple pedals into a bag and have a really awesome live performance setup. I also find it really interesting to have a slightly more reduced and focused control interface when working with pedals. A typical pedal has, just a few knobs, maybe a couple of switches, as opposed to a mixer, which often has rows and rows of knobs and controls. I feel like this just makes the pedal feel all the more like its own kind of unique, strange little self-contained musical instrument, and it really encourages me to, again, act with a lot of intention and listen really, really deeply. Just a reminder that there are some affiliate links in the description of this video, so if you want to pick up an hors d'oeuvre for yourself or some patch cables or anything else, you can check those out below. Anything that you buy using those links helps to support this channel so that I can continue making more videos like this one. And if you're interested in a community of awesome folks who love talking about things like experimental sound and modular synthesis and effects pedals and noise and composition, or if you're interested in extended tutorials and patch downloads and unreleased music, then I'd like to invite you to check out and perhaps join my Patreon community, which is patreon.com/SarahBelleReid. All right, so that is it for today. If you try this technique out and discover any cool feedback patching techniques of your own, I would love to hear about them. So please let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching and for listening, and I'll see you next time.